All right, so as Jeff said, my name is David S. Rose, and let me give you a little bit of background on me to tell you whereof I speak and from where I come. I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm actually a fifth generation entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 10 years old, Rose Productions, a multimedia organization. And I then started companies when I was in high school, in college, in business school, after business school, in the dot-com boom, and after the dot-com bust, after the great global financial crisis, and all along the way, I've had ups and downs. Some of them got very, very big and then got very, very small in bad times. And after the dot-com crash, I became an angel investor, investing in early stage companies myself. And I founded New York Angels, which is one of the largest and more active angel investment groups in the world. So along the way, I have invested in over 120 companies. I was the first investor and chairman of the board of a company called Jump Bikes that eventually was acquired by Uber and became Uber Bikes, a company called Comixology, acquired by Amazon and became Amazon's comics division, Pond 5, the world's leading video stock footage website, and a bunch of others. I founded New York Angels, the angel investment group here in New York, and have basically been involved on both sides of the table as a serial entrepreneur and a serial investor. And one of the things that I have noticed, having now been through, this is my third crisis, the dot-com crash, the global financial crisis, and now coronavirus, that there is something very special about the entrepreneurial life when it is compared to the real world, quote unquote, of traditional businesses. And that is that the entrepreneurial life is a roller coaster. If you are employed by a real business, a grown-up business, typically you come into work, you have a paycheck, you know what your job is, you know what's going to happen day in and day out. And you are working in an inertial organization that may grow a little bit at a time linearly, but it's not going to dramatically change while you're there. In the case of an entrepreneurial business, however, and I believe that most of the folks here on this call, including me and including Jeff and the others, are entrepreneurs, you know that it's a roller coaster. It has got the biggest highs and the biggest lows. Every day you're zooming up, you're zooming down, you're certainly not staying static. And then once in a while, and now this is the third time in my entrepreneurial career, not only are you zooming up or zooming down wherever you are on your roller coaster, but it turns out that the roller coaster which you're riding all of a sudden is on fire. And so we are right now in an extraordinary period with the global pandemic, what this is doing to the entire financial markets. And it is, if this is your first crisis that you're living through, it will seem like the world is coming to an end, which, by the way, it is. But if you've been through one or two of the others previously, you realize that at the end of the day, the world does bounce back. It may not bounce back with the same players there, but if you happen to be able to weather it, you can survive. During the first crisis in my lifetime, the dot-com crisis, Amazon lost 99% of its value. That's an enormous amount of value being destroyed, but they managed to hang on and became the world's most valuable company at the other end, or the world's second most valuable company. And so the question is, what happens to existing traditional companies when your roller coaster track disappears, when the existing inertial operation, the business that you have been working on and building all these times is no longer functional because all of a sudden everybody you have is confined to home? And the answer is that traditional businesses are in really big trouble. Why? Because they have historically, until and through most of the 20th century, relied on traditional infrastructure, fixed infrastructure, high capital costs, all the things that if you had ever asked about what is a business, these are the basic things that business is all about. And what are they? Well, this might sound strange to some of us who are digital entrepreneurs, but if you ask either people who've been around for 50 years or your parents, they will say, well, business, of course, if it's a corporation, you've got paper stock certificates and your business is located in a physical office, and you get that office because you have signed a long-term lease with your landlord for 5, 10 years, 20 years, typically for commercial leases. And that, because you're there, that's your physical mailing address, and people know know that they can deliver communications to you, those communications being pieces of mail and packages and the like. If they want to talk to you, you want to communicate with them. You have telephones that are plugged into the wall, and when you dial a telephone number, you're dialing a location. Whoever happens to be picking it up at the other end, you're dialing somebody's desk. If you're going to exchange money with somebody, if you're going to pay for something, you write a thing called a check, which is effectively an IOU on a piece of paper. If you're working either with internal people or external people, and you're having a group communication, you're meeting in a physical meeting room to do that with a whiteboard on the wall and so on. And at the end of the day, if you're negotiating a contract for a purchase or anything else, you have a signed piece of paper, a signed physical contract. The way you know who you're dealing with is whenever you have one of these meetings, you exchange paper business cards, physical printed business cards there. And the people you're doing that with are, in your company and other companies, are full-time employees because you're employed by a company. And once you have full-time employees, you have to figure out how to pay them. So you have payroll systems and you have accounting to keep track of them and everything else. So this is a typical traditional business. And it is based on a business being in a location with physical things going back and forth. And so therefore, when you have a disruption like the coronavirus, where all of a sudden the mayor and the governor and the president say, okay, you've got to stop, you've got to stay home away from your location, all these things that were based on a physical instantiation disappear. So what I'm going to talk about for the next half hour or so is to discuss how a business gets built for the 21st century. And this is, I'm telling you this from personal experience. The most recent business that I have established, something called US REM, the US Real Estate Market, which is a new, in the process of getting funded startup. And we are doing all of these things. Everything I'm going to show you is stuff that we have done from personal experience. And so the first thing is a bit of my one little piece of enlightened self-interest here. And that is, how do you start up a company? If you're an entrepreneur who is starting a high growth company, historically, you would find a lawyer and they would draft contracts for you, or you'd go to a service that would be your registered agent in Delaware to file for your LLC. Well, luckily, there happens to be a new platform designed for high growth entrepreneurs that are looking to be investable to do all of that back-end corporate work for you. And that platform is called Gust. And it so happens that that was my previous company, my current company, which I'm chairman of the board, which has developed a platform called Gust Launch, which is a digital software as a service platform. We call it a company as a service. So if you are about to start a company now to take advantage of all the cool things that are happening, the opportunities that are available in the middle of these dark days of a pandemic, if you're really going to be a high growth company and you want to be investable, by far the best way to do it is with something called Gust Launch. So let me run a quick video and tell you a little bit about Gust.
Starting and running a company is hard. There are all the things you have to do that squeeze you for your time and cost more than you expect, and don't even work the right way. If you don't make the right decisions at the beginning, it can bite you in the butt down the road when you make revenue, hire employees, raise funds, get acquired, or IPO. But who has the time and know-how for all of that? That's why we created Gust Launch, a simple platform so that you can easily start and run your company, built specifically for founders who want to raise funds and grow. Gust Launch incorporates your startup the right way for investment and growth. We take care of your banking, bookkeeping, and accounting through our integrated system so that tax time is a breeze, and all of your books are investor ready, all while answering all of your legal questions and helping you model and manage equity in your startup so that you don't have to worry when you make revenue, hire employees, raise funds, get acquired, or IPO. Start up confidently with Gust Launch.
So there you have it. What Gust Launch does is it takes you through the entire process. Not only your incorporation in Delaware, we serve as your registered agent. We provide you with the IRS for your employer identification number. We do all of your post-incorporation legal. We set up your board. We issue your stock. We set up your bank account. We do your financing and your non-disclosure agreements and your board actions and all the stuff that keeps your company absolutely legitimately as an investable, real serious company. And the pricing is so low, it starts at literally $300 per year So it's a very effective way to get started. Okay, and that's the beginning and end of the ads for this and the enlightened self-interest. So now let's talk about space. If you have a startup company, you've got it incorporated in Gust, you're ready to get going, and where does your company operate out of? Now, traditionally, your company would operate out of an office, and we all know what offices look like. They have walls and floors and desks and lots of people sitting there. In recent years, it's turned into cube farms. But if you think about where companies start today, they don't start in offices like this. What has happened in the last decade has been the emergence of the concept of flexible space, typified, of course, by WeWork, which has become synonymous with flexible space. But just because WeWork has been the most highest visibility of these flexible spaces does not mean they are the only one. And just because WeWork is currently going through some serious financial challenges, those challenges didn't have to do with its business model. They had to do with the way they were operating the business. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with a place like WeWork, although I would at this point assume most of you are, this is a floor of offices or multiple floors or an entire building of offices where you can come in and rent exactly the size office that you need. A 1-person, 2-person, 5, 10, 20, 50. And as your company gets bigger or smaller, if things happen, you can within this flexible space change the size of your office, and everything is provided for you. There are physical meeting rooms, there are cappuccino machines, there are lounges, there are refrigerators, there are everything you would expect in a regular office, even more than most, because they have the number of companies that they can defray it over. And so flexible office space has become the new standard. And it's not just WeWork. Every major landlord now, certainly in New York City and in most other cities, is developing their own branded flexible office space. You have companies like Regis, who was the biggest hot space vendor. They have now a thing called Spaces. If you have Tishman Speyer here in New York, has Studio, and these are all very high quality spaces where you can rent an office that fits your needs. But what if you're still a single practitioner, one person, you're starting a company as a founder, or maybe with one co-founder, and you don't really need a full dedicated office? Well, in that case, you can go to co-working spaces. And so co-working in this case, drop-in spaces. You don't have 4 walls, you don't have a lockable door, but it's a whole lot cheaper. And typically these desk arrangements are as little as $500 a month, in some cases even less outside of major areas like New York City, where you can 24/7 access, you can drop in, you have Wi-Fi, you have access to all the amenities we talked about before, just not an enclosed office. But since you are probably like me, a turtle, carrying your entire office in your laptop or on your iPad, you can just sit down and work that way. So whether you're getting an office, a flexible office, whether you're getting a drop-in space, you're not getting a long-term lease. You can pay for these things on a month-to-month basis. You get a discount if you do it for 3 months or 6 months or longer there. And so that's all great, but that then begets a bit of a problem, which is if you had a real office with a 10-year lease, you had an address, people could send you mail at the office, and you could file that with all of your government documents and everything else. Well, what do you do if you now have flexible space, and maybe you are a member of WeWork, and so today you're in Manhattan and tomorrow you're in Queens, or you're going to different locations? Where do you get mail? How do you actually have mail if somebody were to deliver you mail? Well, it turns out that you can actually go to a virtual address. And so here is a company called physicaladdress.com. This is what we're using for our address for USREM. So USREM, which is a financial services company, our office is 99 Wall Street, Suite 1780. Well, you know what? If you go to 99 Wall Street, you will see a little hole in the wall storefront on Wall Street where they basically take my mail in. And when mail comes in, what happens? They immediately scan it, and I get an alert. And on their app, on their website, I now see that here is a letter that I've just gotten. And I can look at the outside of the letter. And then, as you can see on the screen here, I can decide what to do with it. I can say, oh, this is trash, throw it away. I can just file it. I can have them open it and scan it. I can have them forward it to me. I have complete control from my computer digitally of the mail that I've got. And so it doesn't matter which WeWork I'm in, what office suite I'm in, whether I'm working from home. My office has an official address, in this case, Wall Street, or it can be any other address you want, and all of my mail is appropriately handled. And the costs for this are really, really low. You can pick whatever location you want here. You want to be in Las Vegas. You want to appear like your office is in Orlando, Florida. no problem. Wherever your physical mail is going is not where you are physically seated. And so, as you'll see, the list of services they provide here, whether it's scanning the envelope automatically, scanning the content, and the like. Oh, by the way, somebody asked what's the name of the company. This one happens to be physicaladdress.com. But at the end of the presentation, I will give you links to all the companies I'm about to show you, so you can set up your entire office. You can have stuff, they will shred stuff for you, scan it for you, they will store your packages, receive your packages, forward it on to you, give you any kind of address you want, a suite, suite 1780 sounds appropriate, and the like. Okay, so now we've got ourselves, and we're working by ourselves as a founder. We may be working in a flexible space or in a drop-in space like we work, but we have a permanent full-time address. But now, what if somebody wants to call us? Well, traditionally, they would pick up a phone and they would call the office, and we're picked up by the receptionist or by my voicemail system in my physical office. But we don't really have a physical office because we're in a WeWork or a flexible space, and our physical address is in the cloud. Well, guess what? We have a virtual phone system as well. And so this is from a company called Grasshopper, and this is everything you would conceivably think of in a large, heavy-duty corporate phone system. I mean, multiple extensions and phone trees and the ability to access it on an app and voice redirecting and a fax machine and call control and automatic time of day messaging and recorded announcements and the ability to transfer calls to different people. But even more than that, what this entire phone system does, it lives in the cloud, and it can be tied both to any inbound phone number you want, and they will get you a phone number, including vanity phone numbers. So you can have a vanity. We have a vanity phone number for US REM. I think it's 833 US REMKT. You can do a vanity phone number. You can do a local area code and whatever number you want to be in. And so once you set that up, you can then do all of the things controlling it on your web browser. And so, for example, here you can see we can set up when you call in, there is a recording that says, "Hello, thank you for calling US REM," so on and so forth. And if you don't want to record it yourself, you can press a button and have them record it for you. Well, the answer is why. Somebody asked Joshua, why do we need phones? Because some people do want to speak to you in person by phones when they're mobile. And so you have, with this complete phone system, you can set up all of the redirecting to your cell phones, right? So when somebody calls your main office number, it can automatically direct, right, if you're a single founder, to your cell phone. It can play the recorded announcement and say, press 1 for sales and 2 for whatever. And all of those can go to you too. Or if you now, as your team grows, 1 for sales can go to your salesperson, and 2 for management can go, to you, or vice versa. So it is a very, very flexible situation. And so a lot of people still use phones. I realize that many of you may be completely using your iPhone for things other than voice calls. But in the business world, if you're interacting with other people, they are still using calls. But what do we see today for interacting in that meeting room? If you don't want to have people come into your WeWork space or your location space, well, as Josh pointed out, we have the ability to have Zoom conferences. So my company is meeting twice a day on Zoom. This is our stand-up meeting in the morning here. You see, all of us, coming in to meeting rooms. This entire presentation and this virtual conference we're having today is being done on Zoom. So there are a wide number, there are literally dozens and dozens of conferencing apps and voice, communication and video communication, and they all link in together. So for example, Google Hangouts, which comes with Google Apps for Business, it has Google Voice, it has the ability to tie people together. Zoom, in addition to having a conference like we're having now and meetings like we have for our stand-up, also has replacement phone systems as well, and it all links together. They have chat systems and the like. So you can have, so whether you're dealing, and it's not just Zoom, it could be Google, it could be Skype, it could be a whole host of other players out there as well. So now you have the ability to project yourself anywhere, anytime. One interesting thing that Zoom has that some of the others don't is the concept of virtual backgrounds. So if you look behind me now, you can see our very professional background for USRIM, which is a digital virtual background. You can have live action, you can have static action as well. There are other ways to do it with every other system as well, maybe not quite as easily, however, as you can with Zoom. Okay, but now let's say the coronavirus is over and you're meeting with somebody in a physical meeting in person. And so now you want to give them your business card. What's a business card, you ask? Well, it's a piece of paper that has your very standard pieces of information on there. But what if it changes? What if it's virtual? So if you want my virtual business card, it's virtual. Literally, I just show them my iPhone in my Apple Wallet, and there's a barcode, and they can a QR code. And so simply, you can take a shot with your iPhone of the barcode, and what do you get? Well, you get on their phone, by just scanning that with their camera app, my entire business card. And it has all of my links. It has my address. They can download a beat card to update their platform, their address book. It has links to the various businesses, to the various calls to action that I want to have in there. I found this to be a remarkably impressive and very, very useful setup that doesn't require you to constantly reprint business cards. It serves the purpose for people who do want to have something that they know how to get a hold of you in it. And this is from a company called Visibility. It's called a Biz Card. And so for those of you who might want to do that, you can go to visibility.com. And again, total control in the cloud. Everything that is shown on the card when somebody downloads it. You can track who has downloaded it, where they are, when they clicked on your card, when they scanned you. You can add notes to remind yourself of who these people are. Their cards in their address book will automatically be updated. So you could have an entire virtual card. All right, how about all that paper that people are signing for? And by the way, I'm getting some comments here from my Jiminy Cricket, Joshua Aaron, who says this looks very old-timey. Yeah, but remember, if all of this, everything I'm telling you now is second nature to you, because this is the way you do your business, remember that this is not the way the rest of the world works. And so these are things, as I'm telling you, this is the way we are currently running our business, and this is the way that most new businesses that are starting out are being run, but you will not find that this is the case for older businesses. Okay, one thing that businesses that have a lot of paper and forms and contracts and signing things are moving to is digital signatures. And so in the business that I'm in, which is venture capital and in investing, there is lots and lots of paper. You're signing things all the time. And so we use DocuSign for all of our documents. And so again, there are a dozen other players here. You've got, whether it's HelloSign, Adobe Sign, and the like. Digital signatures let you upload your document to the cloud. You can do a total routing on the system. So each person signs it appropriately in turn. These are legal digital signatures. The document after it's signed is distributed to everybody. It's stored digitally in the cloud. These are perfectly valid legal signatures. There are still a very few cases where they require wet ink signatures, but for virtually everything these days, you can and probably should do it with digital signatures. It makes life much, much, much easier over here. So there are, as I said, a bunch of other services. For all these things, I'm going to give you the one or two that we're using, but if you just search digital signatures, if you search flexible office space, if you search video conferencing and the like, you've got it there. DocuSign happens to be one of the more full-featured, including a whole lot of workflow management and integration, so you can integrate DocuSign with other kinds of tools built into if you're doing some kind of a SaaS or online system. It makes life very easy. So again, I don't think I've signed a paper document in 2 years at this point, because all of this stuff is done digitally. And if you're building a company from scratch, you should be doing it digitally as well. All right, well, that's paper. But how about things like paper checks, which is how you're getting money back and forth? Again, in the 21st century, although a lot of these older businesses are sending you checks or asking you to send them checks, that's, again, completely passé, right? So what do? Well, for business kinds of stuff, if you're doing business-to-business transactions, the two typical ways to do things are either ACH transfers or wire transfers. And these have been around for quite a while. ACH stands for Automated Clearinghouse. It's the way banks actually go send money back and forth. Here's an interesting fun fact. If you deposit a check from somebody in your bank, historically being more than about 10 or 15 years ago, they would literally have sent that check overnight to a clearinghouse that would have then sent it on to the first bank. Now they don't do that. They simply scan the check, they look at the numbers on there, and they use those numbers to do an automated pull from your account. But an interesting thing is that you could do that as well. If you are receiving payments on a regular basis or you're sending payments, you can push and pull money from people's accounts with their permission, of course, through ACH. For larger sums of money, typically that are more secure, you can send wire transfers. A wire transfer can't really be reversed. It takes longer, however, typically a day or two to do a wire transfer, but your banks can do that. And then, of course, so that's done through your banks and your typical bank account. But there are a lot of ways for you to send exchange money to other people, to pay for things and to be paid, including online payment processing. The first and the largest of these was PayPal for sending money from one player to another. The recent arrival that has become the sort of dominant play for building into existing systems, particularly SaaS platforms, is Stripe. You have Square, which has been the primary player for in-person money exchanges. If you're selling things, for example, retail at auction, you'll sell through Square. And the bottom over there is Venmo, which is a great way for sending cash from person to person. These are all running on the PayPal initial model of peer-to-peer communications, in many cases avoiding your bank. One that Jonathan mentioned is Zelle. Zelle is a peer-to-peer payment solution that's owned by the banks and used by the banks to send money. And so you can send money from your bank account directly to somebody else. But whatever it is, there's of course no reason to provide cash anymore or paper checks. I actually have one of my kids who thinks that I am so old-fashioned I actually have cash, so I am her personal ATM. And so every now and then she gives me whatever cash that has managed to accumulate in her pocket, and I Venmo her the cash at the other end. Okay, so that's moving money. Now, how about people? Well, of course, companies have people. They're made up of people. And what do? You employ people. Well, you do employ people, except these days, what the large majority of early stage companies like ours are doing, and like many of you on the phone call here, are what are called PEOs. And a PEO is a professional employer organization. And so this is what's known as a co-employment relationship. So that means each of your quote unquote employees is actually employed by two different people. One of them is you're having them actually do the work, and the other is your PEO provider. Our PEO provider is TriNet, which is one of the largest. What they are doing is, as a co-employer, they handle all of the HR and payroll and benefits and stuff like that, so you don't have to. So therefore, they take care of all of the compliance and the platform for payroll and withholding and all of that kind of stuff for a small fee. And what you do is you tell your employees what to do. So they are technically employed by both you and the other employee. A question was raised as to why would you want to have a PEO when you can outsource the actual payroll processing? Well, it turns out that there's a difference between simply handling filing payroll things and all the other benefits management and compliance and risk stuff that comes from having a professional HR team. So HR is a lot more than just sending payroll. But no, not one size doesn't fit all for everybody. There are absolutely very small teams where if you just have one player, you can do that. There are advantages if you go, for example, to the TriNet site or other sites that are handling that are PEOs. You can see where the benefits go. The benefits tend to drop off as your company gets larger, but they can be very, very effective for small to mid-sized companies. But that's if you actually want to even have companies at all in the first place. What if you want to not have employees outsourced or otherwise? Well, it turns out that there is an enormous universe of folks out there who in this gig economy are willing to work for you. And the gig economy is not simply an Uber driver or an Airbnb host. The gig economy is a wide range of people. So the largest of the outsourcing platforms for skilled work is called Upwork. They have literally millions and millions of registered and trained folks who are experts in all kinds of things that historically you would be, of course, this is a full-time position. But whether you're talking about somebody to work with you on brand strategy, a developer to do AI, or whether you're looking for somebody to administer your Jira platform, or be an expert on machine learning, these are all available on repeated, ongoing bases for individual projects and stuff there. And again, the platform takes care of all of the 1099ing for the employees and tracking hours worked, making sure that you don't put out payment until you get stuff that you've approved it, but yet making sure that the employees approved because you're doing things in escrow and the like. So you can, it turns out, create a totally virtual company these days. Again, the economies of scale are such, and this is Coza's theory of the firm, that as you get bigger and bigger and have more and more people doing the same thing on an ongoing repetitive basis, it makes more sense to not pay freelance rates and outsider stuff, to bring people on internally. But for a company that's starting up that does not want to have a large fixed payroll, that does not want to deal in the era of COVID with having to lay off people and handle severance and unemployment and all those kinds of things, it turns out that having a gig economy, having an outsourced workforce can be a very effective way of doing things. I know several companies that are large companies that are have their entire workflow and process dispersed. They have marketing and sales and administration and account management, all are done via outsourced players who they all coordinate online, and it can be very effective. The ultimate extension of this is, what if you want to have an outsourced workforce, but a really big, large workforce doing piecemeal work, not the kind of C++ development that you might pay for on an hourly basis using something like Upwork, but rather somebody just to go online and look at a picture and say, is this a cat? Right? Well, that's not exactly a highly skilled thing. You wouldn't necessarily pay somebody $50 an hour to look at a picture and say, is it a cat? But if you are developing an automated, SaaS platform, an automated platform to say, I'm going to have it, take the web and take every picture that looks like a cat, and then put that on, make that as a cat as a service, cat of the day. You may need to have some automated way of figuring out cat pictures, and you might search by keyword, but that wouldn't guarantee you that it's a cat. You really have to have a person look at it and say, is this a cat? But it's not a really advanced skill job, but you need a lot of them if you're going to service the entire world full of cat pictures. How do you get 100 people always 24/7 looking at the cats? And the answer is, for those who aren't familiar with it, there's a fascinating platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk, AMT. And Amazon Mechanical Turk is designed to automate human interaction tasks, things that a real live human being has to do, but where you can define the project and you're prepared to pay for it on a piecework basis. And so you can set up an individual piece of work that has to be done by a live person and say, I will pay X cents or dollars for that thing. And then you can build that into an automated system. So I've seen some extraordinarily complex systems that are all based around people who you don't necessarily know doing individual pieceworks, writing up a description. So let's say you wanted to create a database of all of the ramen shops in New York City to, rival an existing system out there. You could say, okay, I'm setting up a hit on Amazon Mechanical Turk, and I want to go dig up so for a listing of every ramen place, I'll web search every ramen place in New York City. I'll come up with a URL. I'll feed that into an Amazon Mechanical Turk thing, and I want a 50-word review of this place based on having been there, based on online reviews or whatever it is. I then want to have that review managed by somebody else, reviewed by another live human being to say it's okay. Maybe I'll have it reviewed by 5 people, and if 5 people say it's okay, then I'll accept it, and then I'll automatically put it into my system. So you can build that all in. So that's how to do things at large scale with Amazon Mechanical Turk. So effectively, to recap, you can create an entire virtual crowd, virtual office, virtual company today using all of these individual pieces of things that larger companies and the ones that are currently in real extremists have been doing by physical, long-term hardware, physical locations. You can now do all of this virtually, digitally, online, and do so in a way that looks exactly like a large company. You have tools available for you today to do everything that the world's largest companies can do, look, sound, and feel like them, so you're totally indistinguishable, even if it's just you sitting behind Zoom at your desk. And so with that said, here are the links. I'll make these available after the call. Of course, it's also being recorded, and you can download the entire presentation, freeze it at your desire. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm David S. Rose. My website is davidsrose.com, where you'll find links to all the other things that we mentioned, in my life out there, as well as my virtual business card that you can reach me.